Hey guys, Tyler here. As everybody know, Donald Trump was elected to be the president of the United States. He had over 312 electoral votes in comparison to Kamala Harris, and additionally he won the popular vote according to the latest results numbers that we see so far. I have noticed throughout various circles that many people are pretty much asking the question, how exactly can somebody vote in favor of Donald Trump? And throughout the whole entire video, I'll give my own personal reason on why exactly I voted in favor of Trump in comparison to somebody like Kamala Harris. Now, before I get into more details about the why I actually voted in favor of Donald Trump in comparison to Kamala Harris, I first want to state that when it comes down to my own personal political beliefs, I would say the closest label to me is like a libertarian or like classical liberal. And so I tend to lean like socially liberal on issue, but physically conservative on issues. For example, I'm in favor of the legalization of abortion. I'm in favor of the legalization of assisted suicide. I'm in favor of the legalization of prostitution. I'm in favor of the legalization of gay marriage. And so on issues, I tend to take a much more live and let live approach on these kind of issues in comparison to other people. But I'm pretty sure that the main reason why so many different people, they tend to have like a different belief system than other people is largely because of their own personal lived experiences, which led them to that conclusion for that particular outlook in life. So one major issue that truly concerned me on the main reason why I voted in favor of Donald Trump was the whole entire issue about big tech censorship.
We'll double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
And I think the dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact are kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go and that people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick, and has an agenda, and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change.
But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence.
And finally, let me just end with this. Our democracy is strong and the American people are fierce. But even if Trump is defeated tomorrow, he has exposed during his time out there some serious limitations within our system. And it may be time to ask ourselves things like whether social media platforms should have the freedom to operate at a lower level of accountability than local television networks.
When I saw videos of many Democrats calling for the crackdown of what they perceive to be misinformation or disinformation, I was so incredibly concerned about that. And the main reason why I was really concerned about that was largely because more recently there was actually a letter that was done directly by the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, where he goes into like a lot of details on how exactly the Biden-Harris administration actually forced him or pressured him into removing posts that were related to COVID-19. Now, the thing about information is that it's always constantly changing. And so what could be true right now might not be true in the future. And so every single time there's actually a scientific discovery, the information actually adjusts. And so through debate and discussion, that's how information itself tends to change based upon these kind of conversations. And so basically, truth can be found directly by the free market of ideas. And so, how exactly can we possibly trust the government on this kind of issue about the free flow of information when we know that information itself is not necessarily stagnant? Now, let's compare that to what Donald Trump had to say about the issue about big tech censorship.
Fifth, the time has finally come for Congress to pass a digital Bill of Rights. This should include a right to digital due process. In other words, government officials should need a court order to take down online content, not send information requests such as the FBI was sending to Twitter. Furthermore, when users of big online platforms have their content or accounts removed, throttled, shadow banned, or otherwise restricted, no matter what name they use, they should have the right to be informed that it's happening, the right to a specific explanation of the reason why, and the right to a timely appeal.
Do I honestly believe that Donald Trump can in fact enforce free speech online? I suppose that only time can actually tell. Now, the second major reason on why I voted in favor of Donald Trump in comparison to Kamala Harris was the fact that he also stated as one of his policies that he wanted to make sure to actually defund and abolish the Department of Education.
And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children.
The Department of Education was actually first introduced back in the 1970s by President Jimmy Carter. Now, prior to the creation of the Department of Education, America's education by far was one of the highest within the world. And ever since the creation of the Department of Education, it seemed as though that our education is worse than most first world nations by far. One major idea that I have noticed that is really popular is the fact that many people will say that if you actually spend more money on education, that will mean that students themselves will actually have better education because of more money inflow. However, that's not necessarily, you can say, true in the slightest. And the main reason why I would say that is largely no amount of money can actually buy what exactly goes on at home. Because sometimes when it comes down to the education of kids, it all starts back at home and how exactly do parents raise their children. And so if a person was actually raised with some bad parents, it's also going to reflect on the grades. And it also kind of depends largely on the teacher, because sometimes teachers themselves can also be bad. And so no amount of money can actually, replace bad teachers. You need to find good teachers to replace the bad ones. Additionally, when it comes down to school choice, maybe, just maybe, we can actually succeed better as a nation by allowing school choice to happen. That way people can have an option on whether or not people can just go to public school or not. And so that's why I'm in favor of the abolishment of the Department of Education. Another aspect on why exactly I voted for Donald Trump in comparison to Kamala Harris is that Kamala Harris, by her own words, is literally woke.
You know, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke. Yeah.
Because Kamala Harris is actually woke, what has she actually done as a direct result of her belief system? Well, for starters, there are many aspects of government that push for the ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which emphasize a person based upon their racial characteristics much more than their qualification. When it came down to the issue of women's sports, what exactly did she do? Well, for starters, thanks to the Biden-Harris administration, they actually revived Title IX to make sure that women actually compete with trans women on the issue of competitive sports. My final rationale on why exactly I voted in favor of Donald Trump in comparison to Kamala Harris would be the fact of the issue of the cost of food, as well as the whole entire matter about illegal immigration. Now, first and foremost, I am not against immigrants whatsoever. I deal with immigrants every single day, and I have nothing but respect and love for people who are immigrants. The problem that I have would be the issue of illegal immigrants and not necessarily immigrants themselves. And unfortunately, because of the free flow of illegal immigration within our countries, there has been reports that there were some gang members in some parts of the countries that are taken over, and that many people feel very unsafe thanks to the free flow of illegal gang members within certain parts of the country. Additionally, how is it fair that millions upon millions of Americans, they struggle with housing and payment for it, but when it comes down to illegal immigrants, they're given housing directly by the government and they are basically prioritized over Americans? That makes no sort of sense to me whatsoever. In conclusion, are there like a lot of flaws with the case of Donald Trump? There is basically no denying that there's like a lot of flaws when it came down to the issue of Donald Trump. But like I stated before, when I start to compare and contrast the views for policies for Donald Trump in comparison to Kamala Harris, that's why, and that's probably like why the vast majority of Americans voted in favor of Donald Trump in comparison to her. So what do you guys think about my answers? Tell me in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see you guys next video.